you so much. Yeah, K-pop is a huge part of my life right now, and I'm waiting till that hobby phases out and I start a new obsession, which tends to be my habit these days. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, awesome. So I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to be talking about AWS and how it can become the gateway to full stack development for front-end engineers. But before we get into the discussion in the presentation, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction about me so you can understand like my background and kind of why this is a topic that I'm very interested in talking to everyone here today about. So I am a developer based in Philadelphia. I have been in the tech industry for a little over a year, and I'm currently working as a developer advocate at Apollo GraphQL. So I'm a big proponent of developer education, as was kind of mentioned in my intro. I love to create content that helps make complex concepts easier for everyone to understand. And I also am a AWS and front end hobbyist. This is not something that I do. I don't work with AWS or front end per se professionally these days, but it's still something that I'm very interested in. I actually got into AWS through a Udacity program, and prior to that, I was used to working with front end, and I kind of working with AWS kind of allowed me to see how AWS can help a front end engineer expand more into a full stack development skill set. So next I want to discuss like what to expect during this talk. What are some of the things that you can expect while listening to this presentation? I just want to start off by saying this is a what in the what and why and where kind of conversation. I'm going to be addressing why front-end developers might want to invest time into learning more about AWS, and I'll also outline what specific parts of AWS can be the gateway to full stack and back-end development for front-end engineers. So I won't necessarily go into how you can build full stack applications with AWS. I will have some resources later on that kind of show you that will lead you into doing that. But like I said, this is more of a what and the why and like where you can learn more kind of conversation. So here are the specific questions that we're going to answer today. We're going to discuss backend and establish what exactly backend development is. It's good that we have like a baseline definition for that, so that we can make sure we're all on the same page. Then we're also going to discuss AWS. What is AWS and why you or anyone here who may be interested in who may be a front-end developer or otherwise, why you should be interested in learning more about AWS. And then I'm going to kind of combine the two together and discuss how AWS and backend development kind of tie together and what parts of AWS you should learn to become more full stack. So let's tackle this first question. What is backend development? And like I said, this might be something that most of us kind of have an idea of. You may have heard about backend development before, you may have dabbled in it a little bit. But like I said, we want to kind of establish a baseline of what backend development is so that we can all be on the same page. So here's like a formal definition that I found online on the internet. Backend development refers to the server side of an application and everything that communicates between the database and the browser. So what does this actually mean? Well, here are some of the things that a backend developer actually does. Now, if you talk to a real backend developer, they'll probably tell you that this concise list is like nothing in comparison to what they really do. But for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to keep it to these bullet points to keep it as brief as possible. So some of the things that backend developers do, they create APIs that are secure and performant, that deliver data from databases. They also build well-organized and optimized databases. They also handle configuring servers that handle user requests and scale according to user needs. And they also build applications with server-side languages. Okay, so now that we have this baseline for what backend development is, let's get into what AWS is. This is a very broad topic. And if you right now go to the AWS website and look at all the services that AWS offers, you'll be confronted with a huge, intimidating long list of services that they offer. But to just kind of offset that overwhelming the overwhelming amount of things that you can do with AWS, I want to kind of clarify what AWS is and like the basic definition of what they do. So here's like, again, the textbook definition of AWS. So AWS stands for Amazon Web Services, and they offer reliable, scalable, and inexpensive cloud computing services. It's free to join and pay only for what you use. Again, this is a very formal definition, but what does this actually mean? So let's first discuss what is cloud computing. So cloud computing, this is basically what that means in that context of the definition that I just gave that Amazon offers of like what AWS is. So that means that Amazon owns the servers and we as the users, we rent out space on their servers. It's a pay-as-you-go model so that you only pay for what you use and you pay as you go. So as your application grows or as your user base grows and you may need more storage, more server space, you pay for what you get and for what you need. So again, like I said, AWS owns the servers and we rent them. And this is a great model because it solves a lot of problems that that come with having your own servers. So when you build this transactional relationship with AWS and you allow them to kind of handle the cloud computing side of things, here are some of the things that AWS promises to do on their part. And like I said, this can make things a lot easier. A lot of the things that we'll discuss moving forward that AWS handles, they kind of offset a lot of the work that backend developers used to have to do. So one of the things that AWS does is they handle scaling. So this solves a huge problem that could happen if you have a website or application, some sort of app where all of a sudden, and we see this a lot nowadays, maybe sometimes like an online store will go viral or something like that, and you get a huge increase in users. AWS makes sure that they will automatically provision more space without any hassle or panic. So you don't have to worry about your website crashing or anything like that due to like an increase in traffic, because they promise to handle scaling seamlessly. So that is something that you don't even have to worry about. They also promise to maintain servers. And one thing I like to think about when it comes to like server maintenance is like a lot of times, a server is a kind of computer. And for me, I use my laptop primarily. And sometimes like if I leave my laptop in like under my blanket or under a pillow or something like that, or even if I just set it on my bed for too long, it'll start to overheat. And this is imagine that times like 100 with a bunch of servers, because servers need to be maintained in an optimal environment where they won't overheat or where they won't be too damp or things like that. If you have a server that is not in optimal conditions, if it overheats or if it's in a place that is too damp, your servers could crash. And this again could cause problems for your website. Your website could go down because of server maintenance. But again, AWS promises to maintain servers. They promise to keep them in optimal condition so that you don't ever have to worry about your website possibly crashing because of some sort of issue with server maintenance. They also promise availability and security. So if you ever, like we mentioned earlier, if your website goes viral and you suddenly need more space, you need more server space, they promise that that server space that you need will always be available to you. And they also promise that it'll be secure. So these are some of the things that like AWS handles. And as you can see, some of these benefits are why AWS could be very attractive for someone who wants to offset, like I said, some of the things that backend developers usually have to handle, or prior to like the whole cloud computing phase era. These are some of the things that backend developers would have to handle. Oops, hold on one second. Okay, there we go. So now we've, I'm sorry, that is not the right slide. Okay. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry. I'm having some weird issues. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly. I apologize for the interruption. Okay. There seems to be an issue with the slide deck that I'm using, which is okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. as soon as I can figure out which screen, I totally apologize for the technical difficulties here. Today is a bad day for technology for me. So for some reason, my slides are not showing up the way they should, which is totally okay. You'll just have to, for now, listen to me talk. So as I just discussed, we just covered some of the things that AWS handles for us and how a lot of those things, like I mentioned, align very closely with some of the things that backend developers usually have to do. AWS picks up a lot of the burden. So we already mentioned like 4 of the main responsibilities of backend developers, which includes like configuring servers. It includes building APIs and storing data and building databases and hosting those databases. And these 3 things are things that you can do with AWS. These are things that AWS can make a lot easier, as we already discussed. So, like I said, now maybe you can start to see how AWS crosses into the back-end space and how it's almost like you can accomplish 2 goals by getting into AWS. And this is the main reason why I say that AWS is a great gateway to back-end development for front-end developers, or full-stack development, I should say, for front-end developers, because AWS aligns with so many things that back-end developers do, and they provide so much tooling for back-end developers, and they make back-end the responsibility of backend developers a little bit easier to handle. Because of these things, it makes it easier for someone who is transitioning from like front end to cross into the full stack realm. So with this in mind, like I said, AWS kind of handles some of those things like configuring servers, storing data, building databases, hosting databases, and building APIs. And with this in mind, I want to just reinforce that AWS provides a way to learn backend concepts and build backend applications or build full stack applications without the noise. So I'm going to just rattle off. And again, I apologize that the slides are like not in coordination with what I'm saying, but just bear with me. I'm going to rattle off some of the things that this is literally from like one of the AWS websites that talk about some of the things you'll have to study for when you are studying for the CCP exam, the Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. These are the concepts that they cover. They cover compute, storage, databases, and under databases, they also handle migration and data transfer and security. So these are things, again, that like align very closely with backend development. And these, it's as if AWS is providing a pathway to learn backend. So one of the problems with when you are learning any kind of new technology is that there's so much out there. It can be hard to find like a direct pathway on how you can become like a backend developer or a full stack developer. And so as a front end developer, that may be something that is intimidating for you. But AWS basically, like I said, it provides a pathway for you so that you can directly follow without having any confusion. And like we already discussed that AWS can be very overwhelming, but that's okay. I'm going to tell you, now we're here, where you should start so that you can kind of cross this path into backend development using AWS or full stack development using AWS. So I recommend that you learn the AWS basics. So I would suggest that you study as if you're preparing for the CCP exam. I just read off some of the things that the CCP exam covers. And these are all things that have to do with backend development, and it'll give you the basis that will help you to move on to the next step, which is learning a server-side language. So there are a bunch of server-side languages out there. I think depending which one you should choose depends on like what your personal goals are, whether you're doing this for professional reasons, maybe at your job, you would like to transition into more of a full stack role. If that's the case, the language that you learn will probably more so align with whatever they use at your job. But like I said, just you can learn a server-side language. You can try out a couple different ones to see which one you like. I prefer Python. Python is my favorite server-side language, but it could be different for everyone. You can also learn a little bit of SQL, which will help you with building databases. And I would also recommend that you learn about REST and GraphQL APIs. Like I said, one of the roles of a backend developer is to build APIs. So I would suggest that you try building both REST and GraphQL and kind of assess what the benefits of one is versus the benefits of the other. And again, these are all the things that backend developers do. So as you can see, like through AWS, if you follow this pathway, you will be making your way into becoming a full stack developer. And now with these things, when you're equipped with these things, you can move on to building full stack apps using AWS. So using your front end skills in tandem with some of the server-side language skills that you learn, some of the SQL that you learn, some of the API stuff that you learn, and with the AWS basics that you know, now you'll be able to seamlessly build full stack applications. So obviously this is a lot of information, and there's a lot that you'll need to learn, but I've got you covered. Here are some resources here that I really value, or I found very valuable in learning more about backend development and in turn learning more about full stack development. So like I said, this talk really covers the what and the why. Ali Spittles, she just gave a workshop like a couple months ago that was titled Backend Development for Front-End Developers, and she walks through how you can build a full stack app using AWS. So she covers the how. So I think that if you don't do anything else, if you don't have the time or you don't really want to go through the rest of these learning resources, or if you would just choose one, I would say this is the one you should go with, because she shows you how you can actually build full stack applications. I've discussed why it's a good idea to do that, or a good idea to learn about full stack through AWS. She shows you how you can actually build the application. So definitely look that up on YouTube. Another resource that I found invaluable was the Cloud Newbies community. It's a Discord group with a bunch of people who are interested in AWS. Some people are AWS experts. Some people work professionally with AWS. Some people are like me who are hobbyists. Some people are complete newbies. And it's a great community because you can go there to ask questions if you run into any problems. And I found it invaluable in learning more about AWS. Another great resource for me was a Cloud Guru. They have a bunch of courses that, like I said earlier, I was saying that one of the best things you can do is to prepare for the CCP exam, and they have a course that walks you through like all kinds of questions that you'll get on the CCP exam. I took this course and it helped me to pass my CCP exam, so I definitely recommend that one. I think it's worth the investment. You can also go through the AWS white papers. I will say that the white papers are it's a tough read because it's a little bland, but it's definitely worth the effort. I also really like Egghead.io for learning more about like SQL and the server-side languages. They have a bunch of courses that can help you with that side of things, and also Codecademy. That's how I started off learning Python as my server-side language. And I want to go back to this to say that like, I don't want you to think that I'm just like giving you a bunch of resources with like nothing else. I actually have a tweet that lists out all these resources. So if you go to check out my Twitter account at Ceoreo_, so that's CEEOREO_. If you go to check out my Twitter account, I will have the tweet pinned with all the resources that I listed off here, plus probably a few more, so that you can just go there instead of having to like quickly Google all of the stuff that I just mentioned. So in conclusion, I want to like kind of wrap things up in a nice little bow and basically say that AWS provides the roadmap for you to follow to becoming a full stack developer. So we just discussed like what backend development is and how AWS fits in with that. So like I said, I recommend that you learn about AWS and then fill in the blanks that AWS doesn't cover. So like learning a server-side language, that kind of thing. And then after that, start to build. So you can use Ali's workshop. I think it's about like 2 hours long. You can use that workshop to start off with building a full stack application using AWS. This kind of stuff will help you to put into practice the things that you've learned, so you can like solidify the knowledge that you've gained, and then have proof that you are moving into the full stack side of things. And then I also recommend that you share the work that you created with others. So you can share on Twitter. That's usually what I do. You can share in Discord communities like the Cloud Newbies community that I just mentioned. These are things that you can do to kind of like share with others the knowledge that you gain to show like, as also a way to like be proud of yourself and be openly proud of the progress that you made. And also the things that you've learned can be used to help other people as well. So yes, despite the technical difficulties that I've had during this presentation, I really appreciate everyone coming here to watch. I hope that it was enjoyable, and I hope that, like I said, despite the technical difficulties and the hiccups with the slides, that you were able to learn something. If you have any questions, like I said, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Like I said, my handle is @Ceoreo, so that's CEEOREO _ and I have that thread there that I will pin as soon as this presentation is over. So you can go to my profile and you'll see all those resources listed there for you to take advantage of. Yes.
Thank you, Ciara.
Thank you.
We've all encountered those kind of difficulties, and I gotta say, you handled it like a pro. Because if I had lost my slides, like I'd be like, I'm out of here. See ya.
I can't believe that happened. I'm like, I really like the slides that Canva has, but like this happening, and I don't know if I'll be able to use Canva again after this. Anyway.
Yeah. We're glad you made it through it. Funny story. I knew one guy who walked out in the middle of his presentation, just like, yeah, I'm not doing this. Like, crazy, right? So that would have been me if I had lost my slides in the middle there. But all right, so I thought it was interesting the way you kind of framed this stuff, because I always I think I do a lot of serverless stuff, and that's kind of the back end of my application. And funny, because I always consider myself a front-end developer, not like a full stack developer, even though I guess, the way you frame it is, it's like, we are building a back end. It's just, I came from back-end development. I was used to managing my own servers and to like deploying, so like it has a completely different feel than like the traditional full stack development that I used to do. And I think there's some people in the chat who in the question that's being asked by Vivek is more like, how do you deal with like not having that control over the environment that you're deploying to? Do you feel like you lose? There's a degree of control, or do you feel like you gain more than you lose there?
I think this becomes a bigger issue depending on like the size of your application. Like I think big businesses probably think a lot about like when it comes to like, should we just stray away from like cloud services as much as possible, because you do lose, like there's a level of abstraction there, which is one of the reasons why I think it's like a great way to like introduce yourself into backend development and like introduce yourself into full stack development. And eventually like the goal is to kind of stray away from the AWS services and start to like handle those things a little bit more yourself, because it is like an abstraction on top of the thing that you normally do. But you do lose some control. And I think that's like with that in mind, you have to think about like what your goals are. Are you like me? I'm a hobbyist, so I don't really mind like not having as much control. But like for some people who are doing this for business reasons, or maybe you're a part of a team that's like deciding like how to move forward and how to build your application or scale your application, like those are the kind of things you want to think about. So I would say like definitely it is true that you do lose some of the control, because it is like an abstraction on top of like the thing that you normally do. But to consider whether this is like something a path that you want to take, definitely kind of assess your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, because for some people that could be a problem and for some it's not. So
yeah, I mean, I think in my own experience, having done that for so long, like if I never have to manage another server, I'm totally cool with that personally. And even like when I worked at companies and I didn't manage them, they became my problem in a way, because like when the servers were having issues, like database connection issues, or the server was slow or went down. I mean, like if you were the on-call person, you got the call anyway, even though like I'm like, this is kind of out of my area, but the first call is like, hey, the site's down. So I love not having to worry about any of that stuff personally.
See, I'm like you. I don't want anyone calling me in the middle of the night like, oh, the server is down.
Ugh.
Plus, I also feel like it also takes a little bit of the weight off your back in a certain way, because you do like with AWS, you still do have to like do some configuring with like what kind of server you need and like what all that kind of stuff. But it does take some of the weight off your back as far as like responsibility, like when it comes to like if you do have like a huge increase in users or something happens and you don't have to worry about your website possibly crashing because of those things, which to me is like that's peace of mind that's totally worth it in my book. But like I said,
Yeah.
again, it's different for everybody. You got to kind of assess what your goals are and what you want to accomplish. But for me, I think it's like that's amazing. Like that's one of the biggest benefits of using something like AWS or any cloud provider, any cloud services. It's like I don't have to think about like, you know, in the middle of the night, oh, you know, there's a flood in the basement where all my servers are and like my website crashed, you know. So that's the one of the
Yeah.
best parts to me.
Oh, geez, yes. I remember one of the longest outages I had. I mean, which these things can still happen. I mean, it's not like they don't go down, but it's just so rare. And back, like, you know, my hosting provider, they had an electrical storm and they lost power and their generators couldn't keep everything running. So, like, you know, it was down for like a whole day because the power was just out. And it's like, you know, because I had a physical server there. But, you know, one of the other
Yeah.
things I was thinking, um, about in that along those lines is that, you know, we used to have to maintain multiple servers for like even sets of servers for like the different environments that we were dealing. But like serverless, even that abstraction kind of abstracts away that complexity of spinning up different environments and replicating, like, say, a a development environment versus a production environment. It's like I worked at a financial company for a long time, and we had you know, our development servers, our, you know, staging servers, and our production servers, and you'd think all of them should be the same, but like they were never quite identical in that
Yeah.
way. And so, like, because they were always on different upgrade paths and stuff like that, so like moving from one to the next was always like, okay, we know something's gonna break, you know.
Yeah.
But now we
Yeah.
don't even deal with that. Even the deployment has become like abstracted away, and to me, it's light years better than what I used to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why I say that like now is a like with now that we're in the age of like so many people are leaning toward using cloud services for it to like do these things. And it makes we've just discussed like a number of ways that using AWS or whatever cloud provider makes these things easier. That's why I think it's like great for front end developers to like kind of ease their way into learning about backend, because I know like years ago I probably would have been so intimidated by the idea of like maintaining a server on my own. Like that would have terrified me because it seems like a lot of responsibility. But with AWS like taking the weight off your back with those things, I think it just I don't know, it just makes it a lot easier and a lot more approachable in my opinion.
So Nick asks, he says, I barely use Python aside from modifying a Django site. I hear it's great. I'm curious, what do you love about Python?
Um, you know, Python has a special place in my heart, not because like not for any like super technical reason. I'll be upfront about that. I learned Python when at a point in my life where I was like starting to get back into tech. Like I had been one of those people that learned how to code like on and off for a really long time. And I really struggled with JavaScript because it just didn't make sense to me. And because I was kind of like on the path of like learning HTML, CSS, and then I would start with JavaScript, and then something would get difficult, and then I would stop, and then I would start the whole cycle all over again. And then I kind of got sick and tired of doing that. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do now that I'm focused on like cloud stuff and I like need to know a server-side language, I'm going to leave JavaScript alone and I'm going to I just randomly decided to try Python. And it made so much more sense to me. Like for some reason, Python just clicked in my brain. I think there's sometimes where you like use a language that just, I don't know, you just vibe with kind of. And that's how it was for me with Python. There's no like particular like any super technical reason why I love Python so much. It just has a special place in my heart because it ignited my love for coding. And I don't even use it that much anymore. But for that specific reason, I always say that Python is like my favorite language.
And what do you use mostly
It's like
now?
my first love. I'm actually working a lot with GraphQL now for my new
Right.
role. So I'm in the midst of learning GraphQL, which has been a lot of fun. And surprisingly, it hasn't been that hard. And I think GraphQL again is like almost like Python in that like it's clicking a lot for me in my brain. Like there's not a lot of things that don't make sense to me. Which like I said, I struggle with JavaScript because some things I was just like, what is going on? But mostly what I've been working with is GraphQL.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, so I know for Apollo, you do the servers are built mostly like when you build your Apollo GraphQL server like a API. You're typically using JavaScript, am I right? Or
I think most people do use JavaScript, but I don't. I'm like in a phase right now where I haven't built anything with JavaScript in a couple months, but I've just been spending time like solely with GraphQL because
writing.
funny thing is I walked into this job without much GraphQL experience. So in order
Yeah.
to be able to like be a developer advocate and teach people about Apollo and about GraphQL, I have to learn GraphQL first. So that's what I've been doing.
Yep. I was there like about a year, not Apollo, but like where I didn't know. I stepped into a role that I had to be all about GraphQL, and I was I understood queries and stuff a little bit, but like once you start digging into like writing schemas and things like directives and all that stuff, I mean it's what's enjoyable about GraphQL is like the basics are easy to understand, but then it's super flexible and you can do a lot with it. So yeah, I totally get you.
Yeah. I'm at the point now where like I'm on the happy path. So I haven't run into any like huge issues yet. But like I'm sure there's gonna be a point in time where I'm like, oh, this is getting a little difficult.
Yeah, it does get to a point where it does get a little difficult. But it is really cool. I don't miss though the days of having to dig through. Like I much prefer getting a GraphQL API that I can kind of introspect stuff as opposed to like digging through yet another REST API docs and like trying to figure out what are they sending me, and then you get this giant JSON object and trying to figure out, okay, what do I need out of that? It's so much nicer. So not related specifically to serverless, but yes, I mean.
But in a way, if you kind of like tilt your head a certain way, you can kind of see how it works.
Exactly. So thanks so much, Sierra. Thanks for powering through all those issues. You did great, and we've all been there.
For your patience.
No, so that was great. Thanks so much for joining us.